Here we come, blue and white, and we're looking good. You'll be in for a fight, and we fight pretty good. Getting goals is our job, and we get goals good. Looking good, we are Carlisle United.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Brunton Bugle, the best place to get your Carlisle United fix in the podcast world. I'm Lee Rooney.
And I'm Dan McLennan.
There's only one thing we're going to be discussing on today's episode, and that's the opening fixture of the season, and the long-awaited return of all fans to Brunton Park for a league fixture.
With a pass so true to Boulder Stone and Clark's in view. There's a cross and a run, the old one too.
Yes, it's that time, finally. The opening day of the season. A chance for all our hopes and dreams to be crushed in 90 minutes of action. Dan, how's it going, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. Looking forward to it.
Pretty exciting, isn't it, really? Especially, I think the thing that's got me a little bit excited is that the club obviously tweeted about the ticket sales so far for the game this weekend, and when they said it's already at 4K, I thought, could get a 6 or 7K here potentially, couldn't we?
I would imagine there'll be quite a few go down today, Friday. We're recording Thursday, it'll be Friday by the time you're listening. I'd see a lot going down Friday, and then you've got a lot of people who will wait until the day because of the pandemic and not wanting to buy the ticket in case they have to isolate and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, on course. You sent me that tweet from Tranmere yesterday.
Yeah.
And I think they had sold, was it 5,300? Yeah. But 1,200 of them were Walsall.
Which is a hell of an impressive attendance for Walsall,
actually. For Walsall,
yeah.
But no, that sort of shows we're on a par with, say, Tranmere, who were quite a similar sized club, in all honesty, to ourselves. So.
Yeah. I think it shows that fans are just excited about going back to the football as well. Yeah. If Walsall are selling 1,200 for Tranmere, again, you probably normally expect them to take maybe 500 or 600.
Yeah.
So
I don't think it'll make much difference with the Colchester numbers, but you never know.
No, you never know. Speaking, obviously, we'll hear later in the episode, we had a chat with a couple of Colchester fans from their podcast. They suggested that neither of them are going up, but I don't know if that's reflective of Colchester fans. You never know, do you? So there you go.
It is a long way, to be fair.
Yeah, it's a hell of a long way. All right, well, let's get into it. Before we get into the news, we've got another competition, Dan. We've got a chance to win a lovely pair of jazzy socks. Yes, our friends at the Sock Council, if you give them a follow on Twitter if you can, they've got some terrific socks in there. I've got a few of them before. They've given another prize to give away. The same people who basically do the football bobbles stuff. So you might remember last season we gave away a bucket hat and also a bobble hat styled in the 94-95 season kit, the famous title-winning side. So we've got a pair of those socks to give away, and it's really easy to take part in this competition. There's no sort of quiz knowledge you need for this. It's a bit of guessing, really, and a bit of a predicting. So what we want to know is, who do you think is going to score United's first goal of the 21-22 season? Now, all you have to do then is go on Twitter or go on Facebook or send us an email with your prediction, and you're entered into the competition.
And it's only one entry, so no emailing us, then Facebooking us, and then tweeting us.
Yeah, don't take the mick. Don't take the mick.
Cheeky devils.
Yeah, we know who you are. We've got our knowledge. So it really is as simple as that. All you have to do is guess who it's going to be. Just to clarify a few things, obviously, as Dan's mentioned there, you can only have one entry per person. It's the first goal scored by a Carlisle United player. So if our first goal of the season is scored by a Colchester player and it's an own goal, it doesn't count until a Carlisle player scores the goal. So, for example, let's say Shamal George throws one in his own net. That doesn't count. And then Brendan Dickinson goes and scores the second goal of the game. Brendan Dickinson would be the winning answer. Simple as that. So there you go. And this will run until we score. So if Saturday's a 0-0 draw, then it'll roll over to the Sheffield United game. If we don't score in that, it'll roll to the Swindon game, and hopefully it'll be sorted within a couple of minutes of the Colchester game. But we'll have to wait and see in that one. So
cheers. That's us either drawing or getting beat on Saturday.
I'm just absolutely
hammering us.
Absolutely jinxed it there. There you go. So that's going to run until we score. So go look at our social media feeds or drop us an email to bruntonbugle@gmail.com and get your entry in. Okay, then, Dan, let's move on to the news. Not a huge one to cover here. Like I said, the first half of the show is going to be quite short, I think, today, it's fair to say. First up, I suppose it's sort of covering a bit of match action, really. a pretty comfortable win over Halifax to end the pre-season campaign. So yeah, beat the National League side 3-0. Don't think this one was a particularly taxing workout, was it, Dan? You didn't make it, but I think you sort of followed the game, didn't you, on Friday night?
Yeah, Halifax, a lot of the non-league teams are a couple of weeks behind because they start a little bit later. And Halifax were full of trialist A, B, C,
11, wasn't there, I think?
Yeah. So it's not quite the exciting names who were promised in May, but all we could do was do our stuff. We won 3-0. It's a clean sheet. Bit of game time, no injuries, touch wood, and on we go. Yeah,
you can't really complain too much because obviously goals from Zach Clough, Manny Mampala, and an own goal from the Shaman rounded off the result. I suppose a couple of positives to take from this. Zach Clough scoring a free kick. That's got to be an encouraging side because we've sort of had a barren wasteland of free kicks for the last 2 seasons, direct ones at the very least anyway, haven't we? And
yeah, certainly since sort of Granger and Devitt left, there's...
just pinged it over the wall, and there's not really been anyone capable of doing that for a while. So
I think Dickinson's probably got a decent free kick, but he's not
we
been
just
fit,
not played, has he? So we don't know really. We haven't really seen yet. But yeah, it's nice to obviously the potential to have 2 threats there from set pieces on either side as well. So and obviously then you've got Callum Guy whipping them in for setting up the goals from out wide too. So yeah, it's always good to see. And the other positive is, by the looks of things, no new injuries. It looks like just a clean bill of health going into the season.
I think that was probably more to do with the pace of the game than anything.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I mean, we've got to look at that as a positive. Obviously, we'll cover that in the preview. But the fact that we're going to be going to this opening game and you look and you think we've got pretty much the whole squad available to us, you can't really grumble too much, can you?
No.
But I think, like we said, would have been nice to have a couple of harder tests possibly over the pre-season schedule. Okay, up next, Dan, it's the other bit of news. It's the iFollow details confirmed for the new season. So, this is one that's sort of been bubbling over. Everyone's been wondering what's going to happen with it. I think the EFL were sort of keeping quiet, weren't they, essentially, because they wanted to see whether fans were definitely going to be coming back to games at the start of the season, leaving it as late as possible. But as it turns out, basically iFollow is going back to the way it was before the pandemic. So, essentially, when fans were locked out of the majority of games last season, all games were open to iFollow in the UK. They've always been open across the world, haven't they, basically? International viewers have always been able to watch them as long as it's not broadcast in their country. The system's obviously returned to the previous setup where, Saturday 3pm kickoffs now are blacked out, aren't they? So you can't watch a Saturday 3pm kickoff on iFollow in the UK most of the time. There are some exceptions, which we'll explain in a minute.
I think this was always going to happen, to be fair, wasn't it?
It was always going to happen. I think it's inevitable it'll change in the next couple of years, though. I think the way the world's going, it's football.
Yeah.
Football in the world is not the same as it was 30 years ago when Sky started with the Premier League and that.
The actual rule is, I think it's 2:45 to 5:15.
Yeah.
And you had the ridiculous situation a couple of years ago where I think Real Madrid-Barcelona was the 5pm game in La Liga on Sky. And they could only join it after 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't even in this country, etc.,
Yeah, exactly. It was just daft, that, wasn't it, really? So, as previously was the case, midweek games will be shown on iFollow. So, I always found was a great thing for me because getting up from Liverpool could be quite difficult for midweek fixtures. Not quite as difficult now with working from home and things like that. It should make it a little bit easier for me. And the train times are an absolute pain in terms of trying to get back as well, especially as they haven't put the full schedule back yet, have they done? I think me and you have got a bit of a bone of contention over that one.
Yeah, there's a bit of a lighter timetable in operation.
Yeah, I think
on various routes.
That'll probably change towards the end of the year, I hope, because it'll make life easier for me. There you go. So midweek games will be shown as long as they're not broadcast on Sky. If they are, obviously you have to watch it on Sky. Additionally, now this is something that actually I think came in the first season I followed, but then they dropped it, so they're bringing it back. But basically, Bank Holiday Monday games and international weekend games will be shown on iFollow as well. So that's where there's an exception in terms of the
I would say Good Friday will count under that as well, won't it?
I wonder if they might say that they're counting that effectively as if it was a match day Saturday, possibly. Same with Easter Monday. But although, to be honest, it's always, those ones are always at the discretion of the club, and they're good attendances, those games. So I can't imagine we'll turn on and say, no, we're not going to be showing that one because we want you down at the ground watching the game. So that's going to be the case, obviously. As I mentioned there, no change for non-UK based fans who can stream all the games as long as they're not being shown by the host broadcaster in their country of residence. So that's the changes for iFollow. But as we were saying there, I think in the next 2-3 years you're going to find there'll be a bit of a change there because football's evolving, the world's evolving, the way we consume media is evolving. So clubs have got to move with the times, and I think that's the way to look at it. And one just last bit of news. I mean, it's we were going to do a reminder for this, but actually it'll happen by the time you listen. Dan, it's the fans forum which you're involved in this evening as we record. Yeah,
we mentioned this on the last episode. Well, the one before the season preview, that is. Chris Beech, David Holdsworth and Nigel Clibbins have been in a fans forum. We've had several questions emailed across, and the club doing it. Well, we're showing it live on YouTube, so having it's been now when you're listening to this. So if you go on the club YouTube, you'll be able to find that and watch it at your own leisure. Excellent. And I have to say the last one was really good, and you know, a lot of people criticise the club and they say they're very secretive in the past and things like that. But I think actually they've been really open in the last few years, and especially with someone like Nigel Clibbins, the chief executive, he seems very keen on actually working with the fans, doesn't he? I mean, we've seen that in being acted out, aren't we, every week? So yeah, really good to see. Okay, last bit of sort of news, but it's obviously ties in as well to a new feature we've got for this season. So, interesting, John Coleman spotted, didn't he, and the club put out their latest commercial brochure, and it turns out the club are open to the idea of Brunton Park being renamed as part of any sort of sponsorship deal, aren't they? So this is something that's, I don't think they've ever sort of said before, have they, that they would do this? I mean, we've always had stand sponsorship and stuff like that. Obviously, we know with the Pioneer stand, the East stand has been that for a while, and obviously you got the Pirelli family. Was it one of the Pirelli sort of Platinum Suite stand? We've had the Cumberland family stand, things like that, haven't we? But yeah, the Warwick Road end was the Newcastle International Airport end, wasn't it? A bit of a mouthful, that really, wasn't it? Yeah. I don't think anybody ever called it that, which is sums it up. You'd think actually the Waterworks. But no, you just summed it up perfectly there. Nobody ever called it that. Yeah, exactly. That's one of the issues when you've got new stands, isn't it? And as I've said on Twitter and Facebook, the problem with stadium sponsorship is you never get as good a deal if a stadium has been called something for years and years and years, because the fans will just call it that. That's why Bolton and the Reebok's the main one, isn't it? Yeah, and then the thing with that is that's the best sponsorship deal Bolton will ever have got, because that name sticks. I still call it the Reebok occasionally. I always forget it's University of Bolton Stadium now, I think, is it something like that? Yeah. So that's always going to be the best deal. But anyway, what we did is we asked on our social media channels and on the Be Just and Fear Not Facebook group, we asked people, if you were able to pick the sponsor for Brunton Park or rename it, basically, what would be your dream or suggested choice? Bit of a mixed bag of things. I think some people didn't understand the question. Thank you to those people for their input. Let's work our way through some of them. So Peter Scholes says, I think the residents of Brunton Crescent and Brunton Avenue should club together and buy the naming rights and call the ground Brunton Park. Good start there, Peter. Mark Elbeck has said the Boulevard of Broken Dreams. Sounds about right, really, doesn't it? Chris Gibson's got the best of the lot for me. The XL Cheese Stadium, absolutely. I might even drop an email to the guys who do XL Cheese and say, fancy chucking a bit of money in, you know, Cumbria gives you enough money, we keep your crisps in. But I've never seen XL Cheese crisps anywhere else in the country. You only see them in the north part of Cumbria and southwest Scotland. It's bizarre because... And I once knew someone who was a rep for the company involved, and the company wanted to stop making them, and all the reps kicked off saying, we won't sell anything if you do that. I'm not surprised, because I'm thinking, like... Because the company that makes them is based in, like, Corby or something like that, isn't it? Northamptonshire, I think, so... everyone might think it's a local company, but it's not. It's just weird, but there you go.
Christopher Lavery says the Pirelli Stadium, same as Burton Albion. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Two stadiums with the same name.
I wondered if a certain owner's maybe a blocker there.
Possibly. Brendan Rodgers has got a belting suggestion. The Dan McLennan Bowl.
Stupid boy.
He's having a bit of fun and games with that one, I think it's fair to say. Ollie Pearson says the XL cheese grunt, so clearly a popular one. Dan Hutton reckons Pioneer Park.
Pioneer Park sounds like something from America.
It does, doesn't it, actually? Yeah, like a bigger NFL.
We're down in the bottom of the 8 for Pioneer Park.
It does, actually, yeah. I like quite good, that. Vincent Parker says the Border City Stadium. Not sure who's the sponsor there. Craig Lanchbury says the 1950 Stadium. Probably sums it up about right. Rob Scott Buckleluck has said the Latchful Stadium. Paul Slee says Brunton Park. Thanks, Paul. That's what it's called now. A lot of people just saying stick with the name. We know that. We agree with you. We just wanted some random suggestions for what it could be called.
Well, yeah, I mean, Newcastle, Mike Ashley made it the Sports Direct Arena.
Yeah.
I never heard one Newcastle fan refer it to that.
No, exactly that.
It's just a name for sponsorship reasons, you know. I mean,
exactly.
You could call us the Durex Stadium if they paid us loads of money, and it genuinely wouldn't bother me.
No, exactly that. Looking on at our own Facebook page, McDonald's the sponsor, and then we can name it the Huey Mack Stadium. That's from Phil Martin. Tim Armstrong, a friend of ours, the Shilling Latch Cortina Memorial Stadium is what he said, and I replied that saying the Player X Arena, surely. That's a little in-joke for anyone who used to post on the old Footy Mad message board back in the day. It's back, I mean, you're talking going back about 10, 15 years,
15 years, probably, yeah.
David Noble's got a couple of absolute belters here. He's gone with the Prince of India People's Fantasy Stadium. I mean, that's going back 20 years, that, isn't it, to the farce that was Stephen Brown.
Yeah,
And he also suggests the Les Telford Executive Travel Arena. And again, that's a lovely little in-joke for anyone who used to post on the Footy Man message board. Finally, Robbie Carr says the Brunton Bugle Park. I wish we had the money to do it, but it's fair to say that me and Dan are fairly brassic.
If we don't get anyone, we could maybe offer a tenner each and
you never know.
The deal.
Hey, you never know. You never know these things, do you? And I think that's it, really. I don't think we got any other suggestions. Oh, sorry. Howard Atkinson on Twitter suggested Jurassic Park based on its aging infrastructure and some of the horrific games staged there. I think that's probably my favourite, that one, other than Cheese XL. So there you go. That's the first half done then, Dan. We're going to take a little break now, and then we'll be back with the second half where we'll be looking ahead to the game against Colchester. Back in just a jiff.
Hi, this is George Tanner. You are listening to the Brunton Bugle.
We've still got George in his cupboard there doing the half-time
we'll get some
break
more
thing.
this season.
We definitely will. Let's grab a couple in the upcoming games, possibly. Okay, well, we're into the second half of the show now, so it's preview time, and that means we've got to give a mention to our sponsors. So this season, the second half of the show is being sponsored by the Carlisle United Supporters Club London branch. The London branch is open to all Carlisle United fans. They've got members from Cornwall to Dundee and Houston to Singapore, and of course every part of London and the South East. And they've even got members up in Cumbria and Carlisle. They regularly meet up on away trips, as well as arranging many social events and supporters games, and they've got their own fanzine as well, Hit the Bar, which has been running for, I think, pushing on 40 odd years now. I think Hit the Bar has, as long as the London branch has been going, and I speak as a former editor. It's a terrific read, well worth getting. They usually sell it at away games for £1, so you can pick up a copy. They're going to be providing us with information for the away games as part of the preview section this season too. You can find out more about the London branch at their website, which is carlisle.londonbranch.org. And as you said there, they're a great bunch of lads. Give them a read, look out. And like I said, if you're an XL, they're well worth signing up to, because they're really useful in terms of information for away trips and things like that. And they've always got the cheese and wine ready, haven't they, Dan?
Yeah.
They always have. Okay, so first up in the second half of the show, as we preview the Colchester game, is our usual away fans section. So this is where we talk to an away fans podcast about how things have been going for them of late and what their hopes are for the season, and what the hopes are for the game this weekend. So first up, I've caught up with James and Max from the Views on the Use podcast this week to see how things have gone for Collier this summer and what their hopes are for this opening game. So here's a chat I had with them this week. Lads, it was a bit of a struggle for you guys last season, wasn't it? What's sort of your hopes and expectations for this new campaign?
Good question, Lee. It's a very good question. Last season was a bit of a, I think not necessarily too much of a shock. I think, I'm sure James would agree, that not many Hughes fans were expecting us to kind of be in a relegation battle. I think we knew we wouldn't perhaps be a playoff team like we were the year before. But it was. I think it was mostly, well, for me anyway, it's mostly down to sort of the manager appointment. I don't think we got that very wrong. We did let some very good football players go as well, some experienced players, and it was a bad year, sort of, on the pitch. But also, the owner Robbie Cowlin, he did come out a few times and say he's taken a bit of a risk by sort of holding back in terms of pumping the money in, and it paid off in the end, but only just.
Yeah, and I think, like Max says, it was a really difficult year, and I'll just back that up actually. I think going into the year, I think we all knew it wouldn't be the year it was before. With the managerial change, I think we were all a bit uneasy with Jon McGrill going after sort of 4 great years, if anything, with the U's, and me and Max big fans of him and gutted to see him go. And Steve Ball didn't really fill us with confidence, especially in the early part of the season. I think it was quite clear on sort of around Christmas time that this was going to be this wasn't improving, and it was going to be a battle to the end of the season. And as Max says, we did it by the skin of our teeth, really. And it, for us, it was weirdly great in a way. It was a bit of a promotion party, beating your sort of your local rivals in the Essex Derby to sort of essentially kick them out of the Football League and you stay in it. So. It was a horrible season overall, but that memory will live with us, I'm sure.
But, I remember going back to the end of the season that was curtailed by COVID. You guys, you got into the playoffs, didn't you?
Yeah.
And then you actually announced your release list before the playoffs, didn't you? That sort of opened a few people's eyes. So, maybe there is a few problems there at Colchester at the moment. And obviously, as we saw last season with Steve Ball, it just didn't work out, did it? How's the new gaffer getting on? Obviously, you've had a few managers last season, but Hayden Mullins is now the man in charge. How confident are you in him, in whether he's capable of doing the job?
Yeah, I think Hayden Mullins is done well so far. Obviously, the back end of last season, he had 7 or 8 games. He did have assistance from Paul Tisdale, who obviously everyone knows that he's a very, very good League Two manager. We was all very excited to see him join, and I think he really helped. I think Mullins has even said a few times his experience was brilliant, and I think that the players needed a fresh face, in the dressing room. We had a few sort of internal appointments, and I don't really think that helped the atmosphere at all. I think a few players would say it was rock bottom, and that fresh face really, really helped. But I guess the proof will be in the pudding. How much was Mullins, whether it was a mixture of the two, maybe it was a bit more Tisdale, but I think so far the fans are quite pleased with Mullins. They seems to be like a nice guy. Tactically seems to be, quite good. He's mixed it up with a sort of a 4-4-2 towards the end of last season. I think it looks as though this season we're going to go for like a 3-5-2, 5-3-2, however you want to look at it. Mm-hmm. So, and he's got good contacts in the game. You look at some of the players that have joined us. A lot of ex-Ipswich played, but some big names, and they've all mentioned in their interviews that they're, speaking to Hayden Mullins was a big factor in them joining us. So, James, you might disagree, but I think most Hughes fans are quite pleased with Mullins so far. But I guess he hasn't had many games to get a real judgment on him.
Yeah, it's difficult to, like you say, Max, to put a judgment on it. As we've discussed it on our podcast a few times around, how much of an impact did Paul Tisdale have, and we had Brendan Wirradu on the podcast, who's a midfielder at Colchester United, and he said he did say himself that Paul Tisdale did have a big impact, but he was also heaped praise on the current manager, as you'd expect, I suppose. But he, from my perspective, he was part of that, plan to keep us up last season. And he did a fantastic job towards the end. even if Paul Tisdale was involved, Hayden Mullins comes with a lot of pedigree and so far throughout pre-season as well. And I think backed up by the signings that have come in, as Max alluded to, it does look like a really strong side at the moment.
Well, you've touched on the summer signings then, so let's just move on to that bit. Did the manager basically just go for Ipswich Town's release list to pick up those two transfers? Because fair play, I was 7 signings you've made? I mean, 4 of them have come through Ipswich, but the thing that stands out is it's bags of experience. I mean, you're looking at nearly 800 games for Luke Chambers, I think nearly 600 for Cole Scouse, and Freddie Sears and Alan Judge have got plenty of experience as well. Freddie Sears, obviously a name that you all knew quite well anyway from his previous spell with the club, but you must be quite pleased at least to add a bit of experience, because you've had quite young squads in recent seasons, haven't you?
Yeah, the club's always heavily relied on the academy, and you've seen some great players come through it, to be fair. Frankie Kent, Sammy Smollett, for example. I think, to be honest with you, I think the squad needed it. You look at the players we released, which we spoke about, Luke Prosser, Ryan Jackson, James, the other one's slipping my mind, but it was
Harry Pell as well, obviously left, isn't he?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Tom Lapsey was one, and so we've lost a lot of experience, and we needed some back in. Like you said, I mean, plenty of games, a lot of them at championship level as well, which I think is going to be brilliant. I mean, for me, you might think I'm biased because I'm a Hughes fan. I personally believe Alan Judge is arguably the best player in the league. I think that's one that the fans are really, really excited about. What we have seen of him so far, he looks very good. So
wait till you see Zach Clough at the weekend. Let's just leave it there.
We'll come back. Listen, we needed it, and there's a lot of very young, talented players in the squad, and I think there's a good mix which Mullins has put together.
Yeah, and I think we touched it on. We had a sort of season preview podcast last week. Where we sort of touched on it, but we're quite lucky in sort of our geographical location allows us to sort of pick up some of these players who are quite settled in the area, have young families. Cole Scouse, for example, has got a young family, and Alan Judge as well. I think probably one of the big reasons he signed for Colchester United is because he's got a young family just 10 miles up the road in Ipswich. So we're quite lucky in that respect as well. But I think, despite that, I think these are really good signings, and what we've seen so far, at least in pre-season, is Luke Chambers at the back, accompanied with Tom Eastman, who's, in my opinion, I maybe not last season, but certainly the season before, was arguably the best centre back in League Two, accompanied by Tommy Smith, who didn't have a great first season last year, but sort of came on strong in the latter half, and he's captain this year as well. And I think, accompanied by them two, that back three looks really difficult to beat.
Yeah, I think you're probably fair enough to be fair on Alan Judge. I mean, I've always liked him. I've always think he's been a good player, so he's a decent signing. And like I said, you all know what Freddie Sears can do. And I mean, is that one area maybe where you're looking a little bit thin up top? I was looking today. I think you've just signed a player on loan from Fulham, was it this afternoon? I think so. Is it one area maybe where you need a bit of strengthening?
Yeah, I think most Hughes fans would say we needed a striker. I think we said that on our podcast last week. I've had a bit of to and fro in on Twitter with a few Hughes fans. I'm sure James has seen. We had a trialist called Richard Kone, who unbelievable story. I'd recommend them giving that a Google search. He was on trial for us and played 4 or 5 games and was outstanding. Really was fantastic. Only 19, played up front. But he's just been picked up. Well, I say picked up. Brentford have offered him a trial, so everyone was waiting for us to see him signed and sealed. But unfortunately, it hasn't happened. I kind of vented my frustration as there's not been a bit more sort of, I don't know, getting it done earlier once we had him through the door. That's the word I was looking for. And but yeah, a striker is needed. We have got one in on loan today, but we had a loanee striker from Fulham last year, and yeah, he wasn't very good, and that's being quite kind to him.
Yeah, and I think Freddie Sears it'll be interesting to watch Freddie Sears this year for the U's, because I think it's the players and around him that are going to be key at his age. And I think Max, you touched on it in the last pod. I think actually you sort of said pre-season he sort of does look like he's maybe lost that little bit of pace since when he first played with us. Just on Richard Kone as well, I think all I would say to Carlisle fans, go watch his goal on Twitter against Billericay. I'm sure you'll find it on the Colchester United Twitter somewhere. But that was truly fantastic, and we've really lost out there, I think. But overall, I think, we do need another striker in there. I think the lad today who signed by all accounts is more used as a winger for Fulham. So I think we are still lacking something up there. We do have sort of one player, maybe Jake Hutchinson, who's sort of a youth player, and might be looking to make the step up this season. At sort of, I think he's 19 now. So. I think in order to sort of get the goals this season, we do need another one up top.
Yeah. Talking about the ex-Carlisle United links in your squad, I think there's just one, isn't there? Shamal George. He had a short loan spell with us from Liverpool. Started off okay, but then he had an absolute stinker against Stevenage and was never seen again. I think he went back to Liverpool in January, and it just never worked out for the lad. And I know from speaking to Liverpool fans down here, I think his head just dropped at that point. He never really recovered. But he seems to be doing well for you. And I know he enjoyed the result against us last March. I mean, it's fair play. He had an absolute blinder that night. He was brilliant. Never saw that when he was at Carlisle. But how's he doing? Is he the number one now, or is it still Dean Gerken ahead of him?
It's an interesting one. I mean, I guess we're kind of waiting and seeing. I think I might be wrong, but he hasn't been in the last couple of friendly games. I think we've been hit a little bit by COVID. I mean, I mean, in comparison to his time at Carlisle, I mean, he's been brilliant for us. I mean, he's certainly my number one. James may disagree, but he's been really, really good and fantastic sort of shot stopper. He's tall, he's good in the air, and he's good with the ball at his feet. He's only young as well. I think most youth fans have been really impressed with him. Certainly I have. He's been very good when he has played.
Yeah, I mean, like Max says, I think this is the season where we find out if he's coming in as number one. Really, I think last season Dean Gerken was really the number one, but George managed to get in there for a few games, and when he did play, he put on a really good performance. I think Dean Gerken's probably been losing it the last couple of seasons. He didn't have the greatest season last year, and in fact, I think most youth fans would have predicted him to be released at the end of last season. In fact, I'm pretty sure not one youth fan realised he actually had another year left. I can't really fault George. I think for me personally, though, I'm a big fan of Dean Gerken. He's come through our youth system. He's a bit of a club legend, in my opinion, and I think the one thing that George is missing at the moment is probably he does. I think he looks more comfortable with the ball at his feet than Dean Gerken, which is quite important when you're playing the way we play. I think at the moment he sort of lacks that perhaps bit of leadership quality that you need in the goalkeeper to sort of organise that defence. But having said that, touching on the solid back three that I talked about earlier, maybe that's not such an important thing. But I think this is the year we find out if he can sort of break into that number one spot.
On the flip side, obviously in the Carlisle squad, the link to you guys is Brennan Dickinson, and he's been a bit unlucky with us so far. I think it's fair to say. Picked up an injury last pre-season, didn't really play until Christmas, and then just as he was starting to find a bit of form, he got another bad injury that ruled him out for the season. I'm guessing he's still quite fondly remembered. I think he's pretty much had the best spell of his career with you guys, didn't he?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you actually about Brennan Dickinson. I had a look at the squad and I just forgot really that he was there. James, we did a team of the decade last year, and I'm sure one of us, it might have been me, that put him in it. Actually, to be fair, he had an unbelievable sort of year before he picked up an injury, which kind of curtailed his time with us. He's had it quite bad with injuries. I mean, on his day, he's sensational. He's got, I say, a wand of a left foot. It's more of a bullet of a left foot. Very flexible. He's played at left back for us, played left wing. It's it was really, really good for us for a year. But again, injury just hit him quite hard. I think it was a shame when he left. I think he went to MK Dons. But yeah, when he was fit and was firing, he was a very good football player.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when we had him now. It's sort of probably getting on to sort of 4 or 5 seasons now, I think. But like Max says, when on his day he was fantastic. He'd put you on the edge of your seat. He could play full back. He could play wing back. He could play wing. I even watched him play centre midfield one game. He's so versatile, and he wasn't afraid to run at people and put the opposition on the back foot. He was absolutely fantastic, and we were pretty gutted to lose him actually. And I think I think we saw him down at Exeter at some point as well. But like Max said, he's been struggling with injuries. But if you can keep him fit, he's arguably the best player on the pitch on his day.
Yeah, he has just been desperately unlucky since he signed for us, to be honest. He looked sharp last pre-season. Chris Beech very much sees him as a sort of left wing player. In fact, I think he almost sees him on the sort of left side of a front three and putting the ball into the box and taking set pieces, that kind of thing. We haven't had a player with a left foot as good as that since Danny Granger, really, and he was brilliant for us, and obviously sadly retired a couple of seasons ago now in management. But yeah, we're hoping he's going to do well this season. He's taken the number 11 squad number, so that suggests that very much he's in the first 11 potentially. In terms of this weekend's game, are you guys going to be coming up to it, or are you still waiting in terms of away games for this season?
Some start, isn't it?
It's strange, isn't it? We've been waiting to go to games for so long, and then the first away game you can go to that you get is bloody Carlisle. You think?
Yeah.
Wasn't that the last one? Wasn't it, Jen? The very last one before the whole lockdown, I think was.
I think you might be right there, as well.
Yeah,
I think you battered us 3-0. I think, yeah.
Yeah, our last away game before the lockdown was a 3-0 win away at Carlisle, like you say. But no, I mean, I'm not making the trip up this weekend. Mainly because I've been told that on the way back down you can expect a double the time it takes to get up there due to all the diversions at night.
Oh, it's terrible, yeah.
So for me, not this weekend, but I'm looking forward to. I have been up to Carlisle before, and I quite enjoy it up there. It's nice and peaceful around your ground, actually. So yeah, no, I've been up there before, but I won't be up there this weekend. But I'll be supporting from home.
I guess the same for you as well, Max.
Yeah, I would love to go. It's one of them ones which I would love to do. Cumbria's a beautiful place. It's my partner's gave birth to a little girl on Saturday, so it's a bit manic at the moment, to be honest. But it's I think I'm hoping we'll be taking a few up there. I mean, certainly what you read on Twitter, there seems to be a few people who have said that they're going. So it's crazy how it works, isn't it? The last game, the away game we was allowed to go to was your lot, so hopefully they have a similar result for us.
Well, I hope not personally, but it's it's £10 to get in for the game, so hopefully that'll attract a few more to come up for it. Looking at the game itself, have you got any predictions for it? We like to ask the opposition podcast what their predictions are for the game.
Oh, good question.
I'll let Max go first on this one.
It's a little bit to sort of like, when you play tournament football, don't lose your first game, but then it's a tough one. Our team is so different to how it finished last season. We got rid of so many players. Quite a few players have come in. And like I said, Mullins is going to go for a new sort of system with 3-5-2, and it's going to be interesting to see how that works. I'm going to stick on the fence. I'm going to go 1-1. I mean, obviously we're not too sure about how Carlisle are looking, but we think we're looking fairly strong, and I think a draw will probably not be the worst result in the world. I'd go 1-1.
Yeah, I'd be happy with a draw. I think, like Max said, this is really where we're going to find out how. I think this is the first time we're going to see the Col U for the season. So, I think I'm hoping that the back three live up to my hype. They probably won't. I predicted Morecambe to go down last season, and I predicted Barrow this season. So, yeah, but. No, I hope they live up to the hype, and I think if they do, I like I say, I struggle to see where a load of goals are coming from this season, but I'm hoping Freddie Sears can nick one and we come away with a 1-0 win. But I'd be happy with a draw.
Thanks for your time, lads, and I hope you're wrong, but all the best for the rest of the season.
Thanks, mate.
Okay, thanks once again to James and Max for giving up their time this week to talk to me. We also spoke to them for their podcast. That should be out at some point. We'll put that up on our social feeds. They seem mildly optimistic, don't they, about all things Colchester after a couple of sticky years there. And I think I was a bit sort of, in the season preview, I think we were sort of thinking that they might improve slightly, but not much. But having listened to them and had a look again at their squad, I think those 4 experienced players coming in might just help them kick on a little bit more. But the key for them, obviously, I think, is keeping injury free, because they've got a very small squad, haven't they, Dan? I think it's fair to say. looking to the
I
season.
think we mentioned that in the season preview. The size of the squad, they've raided Ipswich for fun, and if we can keep them all fit, they'll do all right.
Yeah, it's sort of expectations, isn't it, management? I mean, as I mentioned there on the thing there, I mean, a couple of years ago when they got into the playoffs, they announced their release list before the playoffs even took place, didn't they? And that straight away said to you, there's been a bit of a sort of, I don't know, they're doing a little bit of a refresh here, aren't they? And I think last season was always about just keeping themselves safe, kicking on again this season. And I think bringing those 4 experienced players in, it'll make a massive difference. So looking ahead to the game this weekend, first up, referee Peter Wright. It's his 4th season as an EFL referee. He's handed out 92 yellow cards and 3 red cards last season in his 32 games in charge. He refereed United 3 times last season, actually. The 1-0 defeat at Scunthorpe at the start of the season. Look back at that result. That looks an absolute stink of a result, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you see how bad Scunthorpe were over the season. He also refereed the 1-0 home win over Mansfield at Christmas. And finally, the 0-0 draw with Port Vale, which was not a classic at the end of the season, where Gimme Toure was booked on 1 Port Vale player. So he's not one who hands out too many red cards. Average
3 a game, is it?
Which, it's probably fair enough,
Yeah.
That's the way it is. In terms of head-to-head record, Colchester are 4 ahead of us on this. They've won 23 games. We've won 19, and there's been 11 draws. I mean, this actually, I was looking at the head-to-head list online when I looked at this, and it actually shows our win in the Auto Windscreen Shield final as a win over them. That was a draw, so technically it's actually 18 wins and 12 draws. Yeah. So we're a little bit behind Colchester. It's one of these teams we always seem to lose to, for me. We always seem to struggle against them. Last time we met, this was one of those games that was behind closed doors last season, but we almost didn't see it at all, didn't we, Dan? Because it was a farcical game that started in thick fog where...
It was right pea super, wasn't it?
Oh, it was ridiculous, because I think, actually, from the commentary position, James Phillips could actually see most of the pitch anyway, but he was commentating stuff that we couldn't see a lot of the time. When it went to the far corner, you couldn't see a single thing, and it was hard to tell who scored the goal, wasn't it? I think, because obviously Jon Mellish scored our goal in the first half, and then second half, we just collapsed, didn't we? Callum Harriott scored a brace, including a disputed penalty, which actually, looking back, was a pretty soft decision in their favour, wasn't it? We were actually awarded a penalty in this game, weren't we? I think they had a penalty overturned at first, didn't they? And then they got given another. And then we were given one, which was overturned. Correctly, I think it's fair to say, when you look back at it, it wasn't really a foul. It would have been very soft to have been given in our favour.
Chris Beech wasn't happy for a long while after, was he?
It got a bit tiresome after a while. The first couple of games you might think fair enough, but then when you're coming into April and you're talking about, we should have had that penalty against Colchester, you think, it's been over a month now, just let it go.
Yeah.
No one cares anymore. That's not the reason we're struggling. We struggled that night because we just didn't do enough and we didn't make any subs. I think that was the bigger problem that night. So... yeah, it was one of those games to forget last season in the second half of the campaign. I've picked the classic clash out here. I mean, a lot of people, this is going to be a new feature obviously in the preview for this season. Now, a lot of people probably would have expected us to pick the 1997 Auto Windscreen Shield final, but...
the actual game was rubbish.
Oh, it was dreadful, wasn't it? The highlight was Rory Delap cutting a corner flag in half, trying to cross the ball, wasn't it? Yeah. And the fella running around the pitch with the flag getting cheered on by the fans. That was genuinely the highlight of the game. It was pretty awful bar the penalty shootout. So actually what I've done is I've picked one from 3 years ago, which is a 4-0 win over Colchester at Brunton Park in December 2018.
This was when John Sheridan's team was starting to click, wasn't it?
It was, wasn't it? It was weird because he had that... There was a point, I think we lost against MK Dons in this season, didn't we? And at that point, it was looking as if he might walk, wasn't it? There was talk that he wasn't happy, and shock horror, John Sheridan's not happy about something. That's not a surprise, is it, really? And it was looking potentially as if he might just leave. But then we got a good result against someone, I can't remember who it was, and we suddenly went on this incredible run. And I think we won something like 7 in a row, something like that, I think it was. And this was one of those games. We beat Oldham on Boxing Day, the famous game where he was fuming after the match, even though we'd won 6-0. And this one we won 4-0. And when you watch back the YouTube highlights, we probably could have won it even more comfortably.
Yeah. What we'll do is once we post the episode up, we'll also tweet
The YouTube
and
highlights.
include a link to it.
Yeah, so the goals from this game came from Hallam Hope with a close range effort, and Jamie Devitt, another one where I think he picked up a rebound from a shot by Jerry Yates. Yates then got his own goal. This was when he was really hitting a purple patch. And finally, Danny Granger got a goal in the 90th minute, which was a free kick. That it's a bizarre free kick when you look back at it, because it's about 35 yards out and he just drills it, and it bounces a couple of times before it gets to the keeper, and he dives out of the way of it. It's a really, really strange goal, but you take them anyway they come, don't you? So there you go. The next new feature we've got for this season, we're going to look at people who've played for both clubs. Now, I've got a list of all of them here that I could find, but you're, Dan, going to go through and pick one out in particular and focus on them, aren't you?
Yes, a random one. And for this first one, I'm going to pick a local lad, Paul Reed.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, Paul Reed, Harrowby lad, came through the youth setup at Carlisle and made his debut in 1999. Only played a handful of fixtures.
It's about 20, was it, I think?
Yeah, 20 give or take. And the mighty Glasgow Rangers came in for him for one of those transfers that doesn't really get talked about much, but they actually paid decent money for him.
It was about $500,000, I think it was, wasn't it? I think that was before add-ons.
Yeah, I think it was like sort of in the $500,000 to $750,000 range, you know. But no, it didn't really happen for Paul at Rangers.
I mean, that was the period though that Rangers had an incredible squad, wasn't it? Really.
Yeah,
I mean, Rangers and Celtic at that point, just you compare them now to then. It's chalk and cheese, isn't it? The quality that they had.
Yeah.
Really nice.
Yeah, so while he was at Rangers, he had a loan spell at Preston. He only played a game type sort of thing. And then he went to Northampton on loan. And this was where he reconnected with Martin Wilkinson, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. He was manager there, wasn't he? I think about that, possibly.
Yeah, and his loan became a permanent deal in 2003. He impressed enough for Northampton in that 03-04 season that he went to Barnsley for 4 years. And
they paid about $100,000 for him or something like that, didn't they?
Yeah. He became quite an established player at Barnsley. It was only in his last season where he came back on loan to Carlisle United. But he had a bit of injury trouble at the time, so he didn't really feature.
Well, I think he only played, because it says that he only played 45 minutes when you look online, but actually I think it was only about half an hour. He made his debut in a game, and he was doing well, and you thought, he looks a class act. And he pulled up with a really bad injury, and you thought, this is just rotten luck, isn't it? And he didn't play again that season.
Yeah. And then July 2008, after leaving Barnsley, he signed for Colchester. He was actually, not many people know, he was threatened with legal action after a challenge in a game. It was, I think Matty McNeil was left with concussion, and Jim Gannon basically said, we're collecting all the evidence and presenting it to the police, but I don't think anything ever happened to that. But no, he had 3 seasons at Colchester, then he went to Scunthorpe for a couple of years, then he went back to Northampton for a year, and then he had a couple of good years at Eastleigh, when Eastleigh were pushing in the National League. And then he went to Whitehawk, and then he went back to Eastleigh, and most recently he was development and academy manager at Sunderland. Yeah,
I think he left that role last season at some point.
Yeah.
He managed Whitehawk for a short while as well, didn't he? Have to imagine that, possibly.
Possibly, yeah.
Yes,
he was joint interim manager.
Oh, there you go. I knew something like that. But yeah,
because the boss went to join Aston Villa as a scout.
Right. I mean, it'll be interesting to see where he turns up next, really, because obviously he's clearly got a bit of a bug for the whole youth setup things. You know, you never know. Maybe he'll turn up at Brunton Park one day, possibly.
You never know.
You never know these things, do you? But yeah,
so that's the first of our random. They played for both.
Well, the good stuff. Well, here's a list of the ones that I managed to find, Dan. Some interesting names in here. Kyle Hawley, he had a short loan spell there, I think, during his time at Preston North End. Jabbo Bere. Got to mention Jabbo every time. Jack Marriott. He had a spell there as well. I mean, his loan spell with us wasn't anything to the right.
He just wasn't ready, was he?
No, he wasn't. And then he went somewhere else, and he was outstanding from what I remember.
The great man.
Yeah, indeed. Stefan.
The great man. That's how we introduce him. The great man.
Le Grand Man. I don't know. Le Grand Monsieur, Stefan Ponavacci, the human, the wardrobe himself. What a player! What a player! I think he fit. Was the last club he played for in England? Colchester, possibly. I think.
Yeah.
I think he finished his career there. Obviously, you've mentioned Paul Reed already. Christian Ribeiro, star of Homes Under the Hammer.
Homes Under the Hammer property developer now.
Indeed. He had a decent loan spell with us, didn't he? I mean, he was covered when Simic got injured at the start of the 11-12 season, I seem to remember. I think that was around about when he was with us. Around about that point, I remember he had a good loan spell. We had some good right backs on loan about that time. Tavernier as well, didn't we? He was at Rangers now. Mark Tierney, he was on loan during the conference season, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And he was on loan from Oldham, and then he got a move to Colchester. And I think from there he got a really good move to Norwich, didn't he? And I think he might have even played in the Premier League for Norwich, possibly. But then he got a bad injury and didn't really feature much after that. So, interesting one, him. This is a proper blast from the past, this one. Winston White.
What a player.
Only had 6 games on loan, didn't he, I think? Sorry, not on loan. I think it was a short-term contract, wasn't he? But
He made a big impact in those games for us, sir.
yeah, he was very popular with the fans, wasn't he?
The crowd loved him.
Ben Williams. Amazingly, we got 65 grand out of Colchester for him. This is the period where we rinsed Colchester for him,
Yeah.
and I think, and for another player we'll mention in a minute, for transfer fees that were probably above what we should have got for those players.
Yeah.
But that said, apparently he did quite well at Colchester. He was quite well liked. So one of those ones, he had one season with us. We managed to get 65 grand for him. You couldn't really grumble too much.
Off the back of that game at Leicester, probably.
He was outstanding in that game at Leicester, wasn't he? Next up is a player who I suspect right now doesn't regret his career choices because he's sunning up in Australia. He's probably enjoying it out there. But at the time, maybe regretted leaving United TC. And it's Tom Aldred. He was, he obviously only played 5 first-team games. Did you forget that?
I know.
Incredible, isn't it? And the problem is, if you look back at it, we only offered him a 1-year deal extension. I think if we maybe offered him 2, he might have stayed.
Yeah.
But he ended up going to Watford on a 2-year deal. We got a bit of compensation, but never played a first-team game for Watford. Ended up going out on loan. He had various spells in his career after that. He went to Accrington.
Was it Inverness Caledonian Thistle at one point?
No, I think he was at Bury, and then he went on loan to Motherwell twice.
Motherwell, yeah.
And he was really popular at Motherwell. Him and Ryan Bowman were in the same team there, I think, and did really well. And then when his contract was up at Bury, I think Bury went bust, actually, was the reason his contract was up. Rather than
just you stop Mr. Rooney. He did play for Inverness Caledonian
did he?
Thistle.
Oh, well, there you go.
On loan for 4 games.
Oh, well, those 4 games. They're unforgettable, those 4 games, weren't they?
Never argue with the stato.
Yeah. To be honest, I thought you were mixing up with David Raven for a minute, who obviously had an incredible spell there, didn't he? He was very popular there. But yes, obviously his time at Bury came to an end, and now he's at is it Brisbane Roar, I think, isn't he? And he's their captain, and I mean that's a lovely old job, isn't it? Really, just playing your football out in Australia, can't grumble. Next up, another man who's a bit of a legend around these parts, Warren Aspinall. Had a loan spell there, I think, from his time at Brentford, possibly, was it? I think maybe he was on loan from there after he played for United. He had a short loan spell at Colchester today, but I think he's the second best spell of his career outside of playing at Portsmouth was with United, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Those 100-odd games and that unforgettable goal at Brighton that people still talk about today. Up next, Ian Atkins. He managed both clubs. He actually played for Colchester as well as a player manager for a short while, but obviously he's been manager of Colchester and Carlisle. A player I think both sets of fans probably forget quite easily, Gary Borrowdale. 2 games he played for us. I can tell you now he had an absolutely stinking attitude. So we're all rid of him after those 2 games. Jamal Campbell-Rice, Mr. £500. I still can't believe we paid a £500 transfer fee for him.
Ridiculous, isn't it?
Just so Barnett could say they got a transfer fee for him. Absolute madness. So yeah, Jamal Campbell-Rice, who had a short spell with us. Simon Hackney's the other player that I mentioned before that we got
We've got about 125 grand for him.
I think it was 105 grand. I think it was we got in the end.
Yeah.
And fans really lost their rag. I remember after that. They're really furious about it. But truth be told, he never quite kicked on after that 2007-2008 season, did he?
No.
At that point, you thought he's a player we were going to sell for big money. But then the season after, he really wasn't as good. And I think
he had a couple of little knocks as well, didn't he?
Yeah, and the truth is he never really performed after he left us. He was never quite as good
again.
And two more to finish. Phil Hadland, who had, I think, 5 games for us, probably similar at Colchester.
When we were churning through players.
Yeah, and a player that a lot of people might not realise played for Colchester, Mike Edwards. He had a short loan spell at the start of his career at Colchester too. Less said about his spell at Carlisle United.
I didn't know he played for them until I saw him on the list.
Yeah, you know what? I was going through there's a way I go and research these things. When I saw his name pop up, I was like, surely that's a different Mike Edwards. And it clicked and I was like, bloody hell, it is. It's the same one. So there you go. Okay, well, let's get on to talking about Colchester themselves, Dan. Yeah, I think we talked about this in the season preview at the start of the week. We're expecting a tough season for them. They flirted with relegation in 2021. They are relying heavily on that mixture of youngsters and those 4 experienced heads brought in from neighbours Ipswich Town over the summer, aren't they? They're the 4 key players in their squad, really. We'll get onto the star man I've picked out in a minute, but they're the ones that they must be looking to and saying, we need you to perform this season.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's going to be a heavy leaning on them, isn't there? We've already slightly mentioned it with the size of the squad and that, but
yeah. Their manager for this season is Hayden Mullins. He's the ex-Palace, West Ham and Portsmouth midfielder. It's his first full-time management role. He actually spent 4 years as Watford under-23s manager. Seems to be sort of popular route for a lot of young coaches these days, isn't it? They take an under-23 role to sort of get the ropes a little bit, and then they step up to a full-time management role. Yeah. Probably not a bad idea, actually, is it?
He was interim manager a couple of times as well, wasn't he? Because Watford's owners go through managers like we have breakfasts, you know.
Yeah, they certainly like to change things up, don't they? He was actually assistant last season at Colchester to Steve Ball. As we heard from the lads just there from the Colchester podcast, the appointment of Ball just did not work at all. It was one of those ones. As soon as they saw him appointed, I think a lot of their fans were like, "This one's not going to last." I don't think it's. They always tend to promote from within, don't they? At Colchester, they don't tend to look outside, and I think this was one step too many. You do find with clubs that do that, they get to a point where they exhaust the options, don't they, and end up appointing someone who's actually not very good at the job, to put it brutally. But actually, when Ball was sacked, he was overlooked at first, and Wayne Brown, former goalkeeper, was given the job. But interestingly, Brown actually had 2 jobs at once, didn't he? I think he was still manager of a non-league side, technically. They just let him take on the role for the time being because there was no non-league football being played. Yeah. But he was actually dismissed after a short while. I think the only win he got in his spell in charge was against Carlisle, of all teams. That
sounds about right, doesn't it?
Does sound about right, doesn't it? So he was then given the caretaker job. He won 3 of his 8 games in charge, and I think fans were fairly impressed with the job he did in steadying them in that last sort of run-in. Although there's a lot of talk of the fact that Paul Tisdale being in his sort of he wasn't assistant, was he? I think he was sort of an advisor, wasn't he, in a role there during that spell. And I think his influence certainly helped them to do pretty well. But he got the job permanently. His assistant now is actually Alex Dyer, who was in charge of Kilmarnock last season, and things didn't go too well at Kilmarnock last season, I think it's fair to say. So interesting to see how he does. But I think he was actually assistant to Steve Clarke, wasn't he? Before, or one of the coaches to Steve Clarke, at least anyway, before he went off to take the Scotland job on. Star man, I could probably have picked any of the 4 Ipswich lads for this. It probably would have been the lad that they sold to Peterborough this week, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Luke James is the one I've picked out because 800 first team appearances near enough under his belt. 36 years old, you know, so he's still at a good age, isn't he, for a centre back? You'd imagine he should make a big difference for them at the back.
He's sort of going to be the Clint Hill role, isn't he, that we had the other year?
Absolutely, and similar level of experience, isn't it? Really, when you look at it, it's he's he started out at Northampton. He's had spells at Nottingham Forest and Ipswich. I think he's been at Ipswich for the best part of a decade. So he's coming on, and I think actually when you look back at it, he's played near enough every game he's been available when he was at Ipswich. So bags of experience. He's not actually played at League Two level for a long time, I don't think. So it'd be interesting to see how he gets on in that sense. But with that level of experience, you should think he should be fine. And other key members of the squad we picked out. I mean, obviously the other 3 signings from Portman Road. Freddie Sears is returning for his 3rd spell, having been on loan and permanently from West Ham in the past. it's the first time he's played at League Two level though, actually, again. So interesting to see how he gets on. Alan Judge is going to add a bit of attacking flair. He's always a player I've really liked. I think he started out at Blackburn, had his spells at, I think, Brentford and at Ipswich Town.
He's always played quite well against us, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. I seem to remember for Brentford he had some good games, didn't he, in the past? Again, another player at League Two level for the first time. And Cole Scouse coming in as well. I mean, he's got 600 first-team appearances, plays in a defensive midfield role.
It's almost like these four are the spine of the team, isn't it?
Yeah, basically, you almost go straight down that spine. That's the players you've got, and that level of experience. I mean, I can't see them being in a relegation battle as long as they keep the squad fit, because that's the key thing. When you look at it, they've only got a squad of 19 players, and the summer recruitment bringing in experience. It's clear that they want them. They're probably going to rely on some of the sort of YTS players coming through, aren't they? I think they've got a few first-year pros who maybe aren't listed in the first-team squad in a lot of places, similarly in the way that Fishburne and Breeze and Simons aren't listed for us in a lot of places. I think they'll probably step in if they really need extra players. Yes, I think you look at the summer recruitment, we mentioned those 4 players there, but of the 7 signings, 4 of them, those 4 they've signed, are over 13. Frank Newblay, who they brought back, he turns 30 in September.
Yeah.
It's all about experience this season.
Yeah, definitely.
They've
very
certainly
much a
learned the lesson.
two-tier squad, isn't it?
They've learned the lesson out there, haven't they? One young player who has left the squad this week, though, is talented youngster Kwame Poku. He's joined Championship side Peterborough United for a substantial 6-figure fee. I mean, Peterborough have been busy this week, haven't they? The last couple of weeks, they seem to be raiding League Two clubs, which is what they do really well, don't they? They pick the best talent. They signed is it Joel Randall as well, I think, from Exeter this week.
Yeah.
I'm sure I saw they signed another player from somewhere else. I can't remember who, but they're basically stocking themselves up for the Championship. And if they go down, they've still got a squad ready to jump back up at the first attempt, haven't they? That's the key thing. So as I mentioned, they're working with a tight 19-man squad. Expecting probably a tougher task than maybe you would have expected at the start of the transfer window from them, because they looked a bit weak. But those experienced players are going to give us a tough test this weekend, you'd think, Dan, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I certainly don't think it'll be any form of a walkover.
No.
You know, they'll want to put their stamp on their team, make it known thereabouts. I'd like to think we've enough to beat them, but it's one of them. We won't know until we see what team we put out and what's all lined up.
So yeah, Dan, on to all things United. We sort of said in the season preview we expect the playoffs. You'd think surely we can kick on, and when you look at the opening 5 or 6 fixtures we've got up to the Salford game on the start of September, it's not a bad start, really, is it? It's not a bad run of fixtures. I mean, take away maybe the Port Vale away game, you probably would have been fairly happy with that set of fixtures. A good chance to potentially get 9, 10, 11 points on the board possibly from these opening games, isn't there?
Yeah, there's certainly no one to be afraid of. You say Salford's probably the first real test, which is what, the 5th or 6th game?
I think it's the 4th of September. I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and so let's put a marker down, and you know the division know what we're about from the first half of last season. Let's go and do it again, and you know get teams worrying about playing us. You know. Yeah.
How much do you think it's been an advantage to have what has been a pretty calm and uneventful pre-season period? Because as we did the season preview, we looked at a lot of clubs, and it's been chaotic for some of them. Obviously, we mentioned Swindon and Rochdale and Oldham, but even clubs like Northampton and Tranmere have been bringing in 11. I think Tranmere have signed another player actually this week, so that's 12 players they brought in. Northampton have brought 11 in. Other clubs have been bringing dozens of players in. We're pretty settled, and we're just sort of tweaking around the edges, aren't we, really, when you look at it?
Yeah, it happens every summer, though, doesn't it? You know, there's widespread movement nowadays. You would like to think we're settled, like you say, bar calling off a game because we had a couple of niggles. It's been... you just worry about the level of opponent apart from Blackpool. You know, as we said earlier, Halifax wasn't the most taxing of games, but in terms of getting minutes in, you know, most of the players have got the minutes in. and it's been pretty uneventful. Yeah, knock and niggle, but nothing too serious by the sound. So hopefully Chris Beech is happy with it, and we're ready to go.
Yeah, that's what you'd hope for, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned about the pre-season fixing. We've touched on this a few times in the last few episodes about the fact that we would have liked a higher standard of opposition. But then when we were doing the season preview, we were looking what games other teams have been playing, and not many teams have had a good pre-season, actually. When you look through it at League 2 level, there's been some of the better. I mean, you look at even Salford, who, you'd expect them to be getting some big games. I mean, yeah, they beat Derby, but I mean, I think anyone would be beating Derby right now. Yeah. They're an absolute mess. But they haven't really played a great standard of opposition. And, then even when you look through someone like, the only team I can see that actually played some decent opposition was Rochdale. Rochdale, I think, only played one non-league side, and they picked up 2 draws against League 1 clubs, lost against Championship clubs, and then beat Oldham 5-1 in a bizarre fixture that no one understands why it happened. I think having a settled pre-season and having a settled squad as much as anything, like I said, we're only really tinkering on the edges. We're not making major changes, are we? We're just sort of filling a few positions that we knew needed to be filled and bringing a couple of players in as cover as much as anything, like goalkeeper and an extra defender and a couple of extra attackers. That's what they all seem
to have sort of blended in already, don't they?
It's you're not looking and thinking, oh, someone's struggling to settle there. I mean, there's a lot of people talking about, we'll get onto it in a minute, but Whelan comfortably starting the opening game, and he's only coming in at pre-season, and other players, I mean, attack's probably the area we'll talk about in a minute where we're not sure what's going to happen yet. But as we mentioned, I think having that settled pre-season, I'm getting myself a bit excited here, I think, and the more I look at it, the more I think, actually, I'm quite confident going into the start of the season because there's no chaos at the club. We've seen it in going down the years where there's big changes and stuff. It really affects us, and having that settled setup makes a huge difference, I really do think.
Yeah, come on, it's Carlisle United. What's happening? Something's brewing. It's far too quiet. Definitely. Always happens, doesn't it? Are we hoping for a bumper crowd this weekend? Obviously, we'll get onto our predictions of the attack because we're going to do attendance predictions this season. But with the offer that's on, and obviously the club saying they've sold 4K in advance and over the walk-ons, it's a real chance to play in front of a big crowd on the opening day, and God forbid, actually winning an opening day, because as John Coleman pointed out, we've only won one opening day fixture in the last 10 years, haven't we, or something like that? Yeah, it's not been the best, has it? But no, like we say, we should be on for a good crowd. And I haven't checked the weather forecast what it's like, but here's to a good start.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's have a go then at sort of trying to predict the United 11. Obviously, as the season goes on, it'll be settled and it'll be much easier to do this. But first game, and obviously with so many different teams being picked in pre-season, it's sometimes difficult to work out what's going to happen. And one of the first things that stands out actually this season is what formation are we going to play? I can't really work it out yet because obviously last season we played 4-3-3, but we've lost Coyote, who was a big part of that and playing that direct sort of style, wasn't it? And picking him out on the right and working from there. And we're bringing Clough in, who's a different sort of player, who's it's almost a number 10. Do you think we're going to switch from that 4-3-3 maybe to that 4-2-3-1? It's hard to judge, isn't it?
I think we could be quite fluid in games and switch between the two.
Yeah.
Because as we've said many times, Chris Beech is a man of what's the word? He's very repetitive. He doesn't like change for the sake of change.
No.
So I do think it'll be 4-3-3, but possibly slightly adjusted.
Yeah. Maybe Clough's given a bit of freedom to sort of move from out wide if he plays at that position, or maybe he plays it almost as a false 9 and drops deep, and you've got your 2 wide players who come in maybe to fill the striker roles. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. So let's go through the positions then. Goalkeeper, who gets the nod? I'm on the fence with this one because Norman played the full 90 minutes against Halifax, didn't he? But I think that's because he hadn't really featured in pre-season due to injury at the start of the pre-season campaign. Jensen came in and played most of the time when he arrived by that game. I have a feeling Jensen might just nick it just based on the fact that his sharpness levels will be a little bit better at the moment.
If you're Magnus Norman, you're disappointed though, aren't you?
You are, but you also have to face up to the fact that you've missed most of pre-season. You've only really played 2 games or 3 games.
It's probably the one position where we can't make a definitive guess, isn't it?
Exactly that. And Jensen's also got the benefit of the fact that he's coming off the back of his loan spell in Iceland, where he played 7 games in a row, didn't he? And his sharpness level should be better than most players in the league in terms of goalkeepers because of that. So I have a feeling he might just give the nod to Jensen, but it could go either way. It's 50-50 really in terms of that. Defence, I think it pretty much picks itself by the left-sided centre-back, doesn't it? I mean, it's Jack Armour's starting, isn't he?
Tanner and Armour at full-back.
Yeah. Tanner, maybe there's a little bit of question about because obviously Whelan played a lot of pre-season right back, but for me, if Tanner's fit, he starts, isn't he?
He's played 70 and 90 in the last 2 games, I think, so... Yeah,
you'd imagine he's going to start. I mean, for me, if he's fit, he starts every game because he's that good. He really is. Aaron Hayden is going to start.
It's basically who plays beside Hayden, and you're looking at one of McDonald, Feeney, or Whelan.
Who would you pick?
Possibly Feeney, if he's fit. So I think there's a lot to come from him.
For me, Feeney's out of contention just because he hasn't played enough in pre-season.
There is that, which could possibly push McDonald up.
Yeah, for me, right, I know a lot of people have been saying, it's got to be Whelan start. I'll be angry if McDonald starts.
I think Whelan's probably better from the bench because he can cover several positions.
Yeah, that's the way I'd look at it. And I think, actually, McDonald gets a lot of stick, and we're big fans of his on here. We think he's a lot better player than actually people make out. And actually, he's looked pretty sharp in pre-season. He's missed a couple of games because of, for whatever reason, suggestion was potentially was isolating due to being pinged, maybe. But actually, I think he's looked pretty sharp in pre-season, looked good. He looks in good shape, and him and Hayden. Actually, people sort of overlook this. Before Bennett arrived last season, him and Hayden were really starting to form a good partnership at the back for me. I think it just goes a little bit under the radar, that, and I think it's going to be McDonald just on the basis of the fact that Feeney's missed too much of pre-season to start. So I think you'll probably find it be Whelan and Feeney will be your 2 subs as defenders on the bench. Is my feeling there. Midfield, I mean, this is dependent on the formation, isn't it, really? Whether we go with that 4-3-3 or the 4-2-3-1.
Guy starts, doesn't he?
That's a nailed-on one. If we're 4-3-3, it picks itself. We know what the first choice midfield 3 is because they did so well last season. It's going to be Guy, Riley and Mellish. There's no doubt about that as your midfield 3. If he goes 4-2-3-1, it's Guy and one other. I think it's probably Riley, just because he's got a bit more discipline about him and he gets about the pitch a lot, and he's a different style of player to Mellish, isn't it? Mellish loves to bomb on and get into the area. In that 4-2-3-1, it's a different role. You can't bomb on as much. I don't think it really works in Mellish's favour. So I think you probably see Riley there. And it's interesting, Riley's actually filled in at left back a lot in pre-season, hasn't he? In games, and left wing back. So I wonder, with having someone down the left, potentially if you're playing Clough off the left, in your front 3, having Riley midfield helps because Riley's going to drop back and support Armour left back when he needs to. So I wonder if there's a bit of thinking in there potentially. So we think maybe Mellish might miss out potentially. A bit unlucky, I think, because he's again looked sharp in pre-season. He's still getting his goals. He looks like he's carrying on where he left off last season. So maybe a bit unlucky for Mellish there. I mean, as well as that, we've got backup in Devine and Charters and Dixon this season. We've got a bit of an embarrassment of riches, haven't we? In terms of midfield players. It's really good to see. In attack, I think we all agree Clough's starting. Whatever happens, give him whatever role he wants, basically, because he's been brilliant in pre-season. But then, who gets the central striker role? Do you play Clough as a false 9, or it's one of Abraham's, Mampala, or Alessandra? Who would you go with?
Decisions, isn't it? I mean, Alessandra seems to be a bit of a forgotten man, I think, with our fan base at the moment. You could make a case for all of them. I think possibly Mampala, maybe not because he's slightly rawer.
But he seems to have been finding a bit of form. It seems as he's got his contract, his confidence seems to have shot up. In the last few games, he started in games and he scored a great goal against Everton under 23s. He looked sharp against Halifax by all accounts. He started that game. So I wonder if maybe he started the game thinking, I want to see actually how he really does, because I don't think he played necessarily as a front sort of striker in some of the early pre-season games. And since he's moved to that position, he looks a bit better. So I wonder if he's got an eye on. Maybe he'll come in there. But then Abraham started the pre-season on fire. He's maybe been out of it a little bit in the last couple of games, but he was linking up so well with Clough. So you wonder, does he go with him? Maybe would you potentially use him, Dan? I don't know.
Who'd be a manager, eh?
It's tough, isn't it? It really, genuinely, I think that's, other than goalkeeper, that's the one position where it's really actually tough to pick who's going to start there. I wonder if he might sort of alternate between the three of them in the opening month, just to try and work out in certain games, certain plays will suit it. Game where we maybe want to sort of, someone who's going to hold on to the ball up front, you pick Alessandra. Games where you're looking to get someone to run in behind the defence, potentially that's why maybe you look on Saturday, you look at Ipswich's defence, you've got Eastman, whatever they call him, is he something like 28 or something? Yeah. Tommy Smith's in his early to mid-30s. Chambers is 35. You're not going to have much pace in the defence, are you? So you maybe look and stick someone like Abrahams up there to run in behind, because we know Abrahams is all about pace, isn't he?
Yeah, like I say, I think our front line may change depending who we're playing and how they play.
Yeah. Brennan Dickinson, obviously against his old club this weekend, potentially. You'd think he's probably going to start because he's started most of the pre-season games, hasn't he? And he's looked like the player we hoped we'd got last summer before he picked up with injury, hasn't he? He's looked really sharp in those matches.
Be interesting to see where he plays if he does.
I think he's going to play on the left, isn't he? I think that's why
you would think so.
Because I know that he liked to play those sort of inverted wingers, didn't he, last season, Beech? But he doesn't seem too fussed this year. I think he's quite happy to have natural wingers in there, and maybe that's where you have someone like an Mampala or an Abrahams in the middle, finishing off the chances. Whereas someone like Alessandra is probably not going to get into the middle to finish those chances in the same way. So maybe that is thinking. Could we see a surprise starter here, Dan? I've picked a young lad here potentially to feature, haven't I?
You're going to mention Lewis Bell, aren't you?
Lewis Bell, your favourite mention. Obviously, you mentioned the fact that we've heard rumours that scouts are circling and watching him, but he's played a lot in pre-season. I know you're a bit cynical about this in terms of, we're trying to hawk him out, but he's looked good in the games he's played. He's played a few positions. He's played right back in a lot of the games.
Yeah, right back against Halifax, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he's done the same in a few other games. So
I think that game just descended into shambles once all the subs had been made, though.
Yeah, potentially that's where you're looking at it. I have a feeling that, I don't know, I just think, I know in the Halifax game you sort of start with that front three of Mampala, Alessandra, Dickinson. I don't think it'll be exactly the same for this game. I think he'll change it up. I think Alessandra might miss out. I think he might start one of Mampala or Abrahams. And I wonder if Bell might feature, possibly, on the right. I think just something as almost like a little wild card that opposition are not going to know as much about, possibly. That's my line of thinking in terms of that. So, interesting to see if he's used. Gimme Torres looked sharp in pre-season. We've been impressed with him, but don't think he's going to start. We think he might have the super sub role, possibly, to start the season and come on when teams are tired. Some
interesting decisions to be made.
There is, isn't there? And obviously you've got your young lad Sam Fishburne we mentioned before. I think he might not be on the bench for the opening few games at the very least, but I'm sure his chance will come as the season goes on. Some very interesting decisions to make in terms of the team. We sort of decided, and I think about 70-80% of it, but it's maybe two of the forward players, centre back and the goalkeeper that we're not 100% on, are we? We're still undecided in terms of who will play in those positions. Okay, then it's the bit everyone's been waiting for, the match predictions done. So this season, what we're going to do, we're going to keep a record, and we're sort of going to almost do a points tally to see who sort of wins, and we'll give the winner a little trophy or something like that, some cheap thing bought from a second-hand shop or something. So what we're going to do is each game we're going to predict the score, we're going to predict the scorers, and we're also going to try and predict the attendance. Now, in terms of how we'll score this, I haven't worked it out in my head yet, but I think the attendance one is whoever gets the nearest to it gets a bonus point or something like that. Yeah. In terms of the result, obviously, that's far too easy for us to guess, really.
I would do 2 points for a correct result, 5 points if you get a correct score.
Yeah. And goal scorers,
you get a point for each.
Point for each, as long as they're within sort of some of the scoring parameters, because you don't want people guessing 10-0 and then putting every player down to score, which I know some people will try in games. Mention no people, Mike Booth. But yeah, so there you go. So go on, Dan, you go first. I've got Mike. Mike has sent his predictions. He couldn't obviously make the recording today, but he sent us the predictions, so I'll play those in a minute. So let's have your score, scorers, and attendance for this game.
2-0 win Clough and Dickinson, and a crowd of 6,123.
Okay. Nice 1, 2, 3 in there. I like that. Okay, let's have Mike's before I do mine. So here's what Mike... I asked Mike to do was to send me a WhatsApp with the scores, the scorers, and the attendance. He sent me the score and the scorers, and then had to send me the attendance one separately because he forgot. Absolutely useless. One job. So here we go. I'll play these in 2 separate clips.
I am going to go for 3-1 to the Blues, with Abrams getting 2 and Clough getting 1. And an attendance of 7,243.
Oh, he's going for 7k, isn't he? Blimey, he thinks it's going to be a bumper
7k
crop.
for Colchester.
Yeah, there you go. Right, mine now you need. Well, when I did the bit with the Colchester lads for their podcast, I went with a 3-1 win, and I'm not going to change my mind on that. So I'm going to 3-1 win with goals from Clough, Dickinson, and I think I went for Mellish on theirs, but I'm going to change my mind now. I'm going to go for Mampala to get the third. I think coming on as a sub later, he'll get a third goal. And in the attendance, I'm going to split the difference between the two. I'm going to go 6,763. So 6,763 is my attendance for the game. There you go. So that's the preview bit done. Let's get on to the X-Files to round things up, Dan. Not as busy as it's been recently because it's been quite quiet. No goals in this section, actually. I didn't notice that when I was putting it together.
Nobody up in the Scottish League Cup scoring. So.
No, so it's we'll have goals next week, obviously. You think it'll be packed with them.
Transfers, former Kiwi keeper Max Crocombe has went from Melbourne Victory to Grimsby Town.
That's one hell of a downgrade, isn't it? Really, my word. He actually was at Brisbane Raw with Gillespie and Aldred, wasn't he? For
yeah. Mark Cullen has finally signed for Hartlepool. I think we mentioned in the season preview they were just waiting for him to recover a knock so he could do his medical. That's gone through.
That's effectively a move back home, isn't it? Because I think he's from the northeast.
He's a northeast lad. Yeah. Liam Lightfoot, who we released in the summer after his 1 year as a pro, has signed for Workington.
Yeah, decent his brother's there as well. Carl Lightfoot is there.
I think he's in the academy, but he's actually played for the first team.
Yeah.
Ryan Swales, who left the youth setup in the summer, went to Gretna 2008, but has already gone to Carlisle City.
Yeah, Carlisle City putting together a decent squad this season.
Yeah, got beat last night though. So.
But Jarrow, I think, it was a late goal, wasn't it? I think for Jarrow,
yeah. And the pantomime villain, we'll see him in a couple of weeks. Harry McCurdy has signed for Swindon after his trial there.
This has got to be a last chance though for him, you'd think.
Yeah.
As a Football League player. I mean, do you see his introduction photo? Wearing his Buzz Lightyear t-shirt.
He's some boy, isn't he?
Yeah, fair play. Like, he does what he wants, and that's the way he lives his life. And I'm sure he'll be delighted to be a little bit closer to his beloved Chelsea as well, so he can go and watch them.
A couple of coaching moves. Paul Arneson is doing well in his coaching career down under. I found a piece about him. And Tony Elliott is now in a new role as assistant head coach of Birmingham City Women.
I think he's been in the setup there, hasn't he, for a while, though, hasn't he? I think he's been based back down in Birmingham.
Yeah, he's been doing his keeper stuff and he runs keeper schools and all whatnot.
Yeah.
A few little other bits. Summer trialist George Sykes Kenworthy has signed for Boston United.
Have you seen they've got a new ground, Boston?
Yeah.
It's a lovely little setup. You look at it and you think, something a little bit bigger for us would be perfect like that, but never going to happen, is it?
No. Ex-Blues striker Sean Miller played as a trialist for Nantwich Town near Crewe. I used
to know someone in school, and indulge me here. This is a little bit for one of our listeners, Simon, who's a friend of ours. A lad went to my school who'd moved up from the Crewe area. And he'd been in Crewe's academy for a little bit and then left. He was a very good footballer. And then he signed for Nantwich Town. And I think he was still sort of technically a Nantwich Town player when he came up to us. And he would always bang on about the fact he played for Nantwich Town. It wasn't until one of us actually looked it up on the internet and we saw how low down we were that we just ripped the piss out of him for it. He was an odd lad, to put it bluntly. Good old Kelvin Jones, he was called.
Dean Furman is now on trial at Wrexham after ending his spell at Oldham.
I mean, to be honest, if you're Dean Furman, you look at the option to go into either Oldham or Wrexham. Right now, you'd go to Wrexham, wouldn't you?
Of course you would.
Because big things are happening there. So,
and a little bit of sad news that we picked up. One ex-Blue and a one-game wonder from our special, Ron Oosthuizen, passed away through the week. So.
Yeah. I mean, he only played one game for the Blues, but I think he settled in the city, didn't he, for quite a bit?
Yeah, so. he had a business and whatnot. Some of the older listeners will know. Yeah. But thoughts with his family and friends.
Indeed. Agree on that one. And that's it, Dan. There we are. We're at the end of the episode. It's going to be another long one because we've got bits from the guys from Colchester. So enjoy your listen, everyone.
We'll be back down to the hour mark in future. But just with it being the first game of the season, there's always that little bit extra.
Indeed there is. Once again, thanks to our sponsors, the London branch, for sponsoring part of the show this season. Really do appreciate that. It's really helped us in terms of some of our costs with hosting to make sure you can all get the podcast as easily as possible. On that note, just a reminder to everyone, if you're listening to this online or something, you can subscribe to the podcast. Get yourself a podcast app on your phone, whether that be Acast. You can use Spotify, you can use Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, all kinds of different apps you can use. If you go on there, just search for Brunton Bugle, click subscribe, and you'll get every episode as they're released. It'll come straight into your little inbox there. And as well, on those apps, if you can give us a review, a 5-star review, that'd be brilliant, because that's the way that more people get to find out about the podcast in all the podcast charts and things like that. That'd be really, really appreciated. In terms of the world map of listeners, we haven't updated this for a few episodes, Dan, but we've got a new country. We're venturing to Central America, aren't we?
We are.
Costa Rica. Hello to our Costa Rican listener. If you're listening right now, thank you. Thank you for becoming part of the family. We still haven't got around to actually putting together the full map, have we? But
San Jose Blues.
Indeed. So I'll put together a map that shows all the different countries where we've got people listening. And just before I finish, in terms of upcoming episodes, I'm going to be recording a few bits on the match day on Saturday. I'll be speaking to a few people, asking them what it's like. What's it like being back at the match for the first time in God knows how long. If you see me out and about, I'll be at the game. Just come over and say hello, and I'll be happy to record a little bit with you, and you can tell me how you're feeling about being back at Brunton Park. We'll hopefully get that out on Monday. Alongside that, we'll do a little special mini preview episode on the Sheffield United game. We won't be reviewing the Colchester game in that episode, because we're just going to keep it a little small, like half an hour episode, because we're having a chat with the Blades pod guys to talk about all things Sheffield United as part of that as well. Yeah, so that's what we've got coming up. And then obviously at the end of next week, we'll be doing the preview episode for the Swindon game, where we'll review the Sheffield United and Colchester games as well. I think that's it as well. I think on Saturday I might be doing a few little bits on our Twitter feed as well. I might do a few little fleets, those little mini videos you can do.
Just those fleets.
Well, there you go. Then I'm going to be doing them. So I'm going to do a few little bits on our social media feed of what it's like being back at the match. It's going to be a different experience for me, actually, because I'm actually coming up on Friday night, and I'm coming through from Cockermouth with my good mate Rob, who's not been to a game for probably pushing on 10, 12 years maybe. You remember Rob from playing in the old sports games back in the day. Yes. So Rob's going to be coming to the game with me, and I'll catch up with him as well. Maybe do a few little bits with him about what it's like being back at Brunton Park for first time in a while. There you go, Dan. I've got to head off and get on with a few of the bits. I'm sure you've got a few bits to get on with today. You've got to get ready for the fans forum tonight. Should be good stuff. So thanks everyone for listening, and up the Blues.
Up the Blues.